A new development has emerged in the Kirk Cousins trade saga, and it seems we might have to wait until the draft for any potential trade to happen. I'll break down the latest rumor that came in today. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer recently shared some of the insights he's hearing, including a detailed section about Cousins' situation. Here's a key point from his report. Why would Kirk Cousins agree to a trade to a team where he's just a placeholder? The thinking is that Cousins would rather wait and see what unfolds during the draft before committing to a move. This makes a lot of sense from his perspective. Why would he sign off on a trade to a team like the Browns, for example, if they were to draft a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall? He'd end up right back in the same position as last season, fighting off a rookie trying to take his job, with everyone expecting him to step aside for the future star. I fully agree with Breer's assessment. It's clear why Cousins would want to wait and see how the draft shakes out before accepting any trade offers. That said, I still believe Kirk Cousins will be off the Falcons roster by the time Week 1 rolls around. Now, not everyone shares this view, and some fans may not want to see him go, which is understandable. After all, trading Cousins doesn't offer much in terms of financial gain. Yes, it would provide some salary cap relief, but it's not a significant amount. Ultimately, moving him would free up some money for Falcons owner Arthur Blank, but it's not a major financial boost in the grand scheme of things. You might argue that keeping Kirk Cousins offers some savings, especially when it comes to not having to find a new backup quarterback. I understand that perspective. However, my counterpoint is that I don't see Cousins as a good fit as a backup for a young player like Michael Penix. I don't believe Cousins wants to stay in Atlanta. In fact, he even approached the owner about wanting to be traded. It's clear that Cousins isn't invested in staying with the Falcons, and I'm not interested in keeping someone who's unhappy with their role. The Falcons would be better off finding a backup who is content with being just that, a backup. You don't want someone sulking or unhappy with the situation, and all signs point to that being the case with Cousins. If your concern is that moving Cousins means having to go out and find a new backup quarterback, I have a solution. Trade backups. What if the Falcons swapped Cousins for a backup who's eager to be in that role? For example, the Browns could be a fit. They traded for Kenny Pickett, but what if they end up moving him to Atlanta? It could look like this. The Falcons send Cousins to Cleveland in exchange for Pickett and a 5th-round draft pick. It might sound unconventional, but for the Browns, it wouldn't be a bad deal. They essentially traded for Pickett and could now deal him for Cousins, which could make sense for both teams. If not the Browns, the Giants could also be an option. If Aaron Rodgers ends up with the Steelers and Russell Wilson joins the Browns, the Giants might feel uneasy about relying on Jameis Winston as their starter. They could opt to bring in Kirk Cousins while the Falcons give Tommy DeVito a fresh start. Or, how about the Steelers? If Pittsburgh misses out on Rodgers and Wilson ends up with the Browns, the Steelers might look to make a move for Cousins. It's a bit of a triangle right now with all the potential quarterback moves between Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New York, and any of these teams could make sense as a landing spot for Cousins. Let's say the Steelers decide they want to bring in Kirk Cousins after missing out on Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. They might feel Cousins gives them a better chance to win than Mason Rudolph. In this case, it could be a simple swap. Mason Rudolph heads to Atlanta, and Kirk Cousins goes to Pittsburgh. The beauty of this move is that the Falcons wouldn't need to spend extra money on a new backup quarterback. It's just a change in situations. None of these quarterbacks were going to start for their new teams anyway, so they likely won't be upset about the switch. They were all set to be quarterback 2s at best, regardless of where they landed. This feels like a win-win across the board. Pittsburgh gets a veteran who could potentially compete for the starting role, and Atlanta gets a backup who is okay with his place on the depth chart. It's a pretty straightforward trade that benefits both sides. Now, before we dive into some of the draft buzz, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty of free agency coverage still to come as we get closer to the NFL draft, along with mock drafts, rumors, and targets. We're closing in on 35,000 subscribers, so if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Speaking of the draft, I saw Raheem Morris at Mike Green's Pro Day over at Marshall. It's not a huge surprise to see the head coach of a team in need of a pass rusher attending a pass rusher's pro day, but it's worth noting. As we get closer to the draft, I'm even more confident that the Falcons will select an edge rusher with the 15th overall pick. If you've been following the channel, you know Will Anderson is my favorite pick for Atlanta. He's just too talented to pass up if he's still available at 15. But given how badly the Falcons need help with their pass rush, even if Anderson is there, I expect them to go with an edge rusher. So, with that in mind, here are my top 5 edge rushers for the Falcons. At number 1, we've got Abdul Carter, who's the clear top edge rusher in this draft class. He won't be available at 15, so moving on. At number 2, I've got Jalen Walker. This one might surprise some of you. He's a player we've discussed a few times on the channel, and while I wasn't super excited about the Falcons selecting him at 15, I've had a chance to dive deeper into his game recently. I was traveling this past weekend, spent some time at the airport, and really took a good look at Walker. It sounds a little weird, but it was a great opportunity to give him the attention he deserves. Initially, I wasn't entirely sold on Jalen Walker as a prospect. I felt I needed to learn more about him before forming a solid opinion. However, after spending some time on my flight and waiting at the airport, I left Las Vegas with a newfound respect for Walker as a player. I genuinely believe he would be a fantastic pick for Atlanta. At first, I hesitated about Walker joining the Falcons because I thought the team needed an edge rusher. I viewed him as a tweener, someone who might fit better as an off-ball linebacker in the NFL. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing 243 pounds, he seemed to fit that mold. But after doing some research, I realized that players like Micah Parsons, who started as an off-ball linebacker at Penn State, successfully transitioned into a full-fledged defensive end in the NFL. Parsons is only slightly bigger at 6'3" and 247 pounds, yet he has thrived as a defensive end. So it's not far-fetched to think Walker could bulk up a bit and become a traditional edge rusher for Atlanta. When you look at Walker's production, it's hard not to be impressed. He and Mike Williams both recorded 6.5 sacks, leading the Bulldogs, along with 60 tackles and 11 tackles for loss. The reason he might not be seen as a consensus top 10 pick is that he only started 1 year at Georgia. However, I don't see that as a negative reflection on him. Rather, it highlights just how deep and talented the Georgia defense has been year after year. Atlanta's defense certainly needs help, especially in the pass rushing department. But more than that, they need playmakers, players who can make a difference and sell jerseys. I believe Jalen Walker has the potential to be an incredibly versatile and dynamic player in the NFL. Right now, Atlanta's defense feels like it's starting from scratch, so why not go for the best player available and figure out the rest later? This is a complete turnaround for me. Just a week or two ago, I was skeptical about Walker, preferring an edge rusher instead of a linebacker. But after diving deep into everything about him over the weekend, I came away convinced that he would be a great fit in a Falcons jersey. Keeping him in Georgia could be a smart move, and I see him as a player you can build your defense around in the coming years. You'll be glad to have him on your team rather than facing him. So, while Jalen Walker is my number 2 choice, he might as well be my top pick for the Falcons, especially since Abdul Carter likely won't be available at 15. Now let's move on to my next picks. At number 3, I'm going with Mike Green. If you watch his tape from 2024, it's hard to argue that he isn't one of the best pure defensive ends in the game. Green is a player who can step in and start chasing down quarterbacks right away. He's not a raw prospect, he's ready to make an impact. With 17 sacks leading the nation, he's proven himself, even if playing in the Sun Belt might not seem like the toughest competition. While the competition in the Sun Belt may not be the toughest, Mike Green showed up when it mattered most, especially against strong teams like Ohio State in September. Now, let's shift gears and talk about another Bulldog, Michael Williams. He's more of a traditional defensive end and edge rusher, but his production in 2024 didn't quite meet expectations. I believe his early season ankle injury played a significant role in that. He finished with just 5 sacks and 21 tackles, along with 2 forced fumbles. However, I see potential in Williams to develop as he heals. His frame is ideal for a defensive end or outside linebacker, and I think he can make a real impact at the next level. At number 5, I'm highlighting James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. Many thought he could be the top pick heading into 2024, but he didn't quite live up to those lofty expectations. Still, I see him as a first-round talent. His pass rushing numbers weren't as impressive as some hoped, finishing with only 7.5 sacks and 38 tackles. However, I believe he's a better run stopper than people give him credit for, though I might be a bit biased as a Tennessee fan. There are some concerns about his locker room presence and character, which is something to consider. While teams often focus on what players do on the field, it's essential to remember how off-field issues can impact a player's career. Some teams have regretted ignoring these concerns in the past. Pierce earns his spot at number 5 because he's one of the fastest edge rushers we've seen in recent years, clocking in with a sub 4.5 second 40-yard dash. If you're looking for speed, he's definitely your guy. Now, would I take Jalen Walker at pick number 15? Absolutely. I believe he's an exceptional football player, and for a defense that desperately needs talent, it makes sense to grab the best player available and figure out the rest later. My perspective on this Georgia defender has completely changed. Before we wrap up, I want to mention 2 quick things. First, there seems to be a fantastic clearance sale happening, so if you're looking for some sideline gear, t-shirts, or polos, now's a great time to check it out. Finally, let's give a shout out to one of our commenters from the previous video. The commenter of the day is Batmine. Thank you for your engagement, and here's to you. 2 claps for your support. Enjoy your Monday, and I'll be back tomorrow with more updates on the Falcons.